What a win for Kansas State, and it's got you thinking that they might have turned a corner. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making this your first listen of the day. We are coming at you right after the Kansas State domination against Oklahoma State. And don't look now, everyone, but it is a winning streak. We're going to get to this game and break it down. But first, Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customer can bet just $5. You get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. What a game this was from the start. And I mentioned in the preview episode a couple days ago that if they didn't get this win, then all of the excitement that we had with the ranked win over West Virginia, the ranked win over Cincinnati, if they didn't get this win at home against Oklahoma State, a revenge game, if you will, then it wouldn't matter. I would be ready to blow it all up all over again and start over. But they got the win, and it was a very exciting win from the get-go. Right off the bat, already see comments coming in. I absolutely love it. We are live, folks, so definitely get your comments and your questions, as we're going to definitely answer them here on this post-game show. But what a game for Kansas State, 85-57. And just like the game against the last game they just played against West Virginia, it was a new rotation. They had that new style rotation where they were more focused on that 5-6 players coming in. And right off the bat, it proved to be high energy. Am I wrong for thinking this? That after all of these conversations that we've had over the last couple of weeks with Jerome Tang and the building up of this roster and obviously the woes that started this season, am I wrong for thinking that the fact that he continued to say buy-in, the buy-in is obviously here? And if this is what he was looking for, are we in a spot right now to where it is a completely different basketball team? Are we at the point to where this team could make a run? Like, am I wrong for thinking that if we see a Kansas State Wildcats basketball team that plays like they have against Oklahoma State in this one? Yes, I know they're also 2-7 in the conference. I absolutely understand the competition level with one of those wins being against a Kansas State team at home in Stillwater when we were struggling. I get it. But after beating ranked West Virginia and then topping it off with a nice stacked win against Oklahoma State, how do you feel heading into Ames? Excuse me, how do you feel with the game against Iowa State? Yeah, it's in Ames, right? On the road. Yeah, another back-to-back Big 12 conference schedule. No team in the conference has more back-to-back road games in Big 12 play like Kansas State. They have 4 of them, and this is going to be the third route with them heading to Iowa State on Saturday. How do you feel about them going into Iowa State now? Iowa State just had a tough loss against Arizona. Kansas State is rolling with that win against West Virginia, this dominant win against Oklahoma State. I feel a lot better now than I did a week ago when I saw this on the schedule. When I saw third-ranked Ohio State on the schedule. This is a team that was supposed to be good, folks. We knew it from the very beginning. We knew this team had the potential to be very good. We headed into this season with feelings that this team could make it to the NCAA tournament and make a deep run. Now, obviously, the woes at the beginning of the year, the non-conference schedule, sucking up all the energy of this team, and then, of course, the way that the Big 12 play started, with the exception of Cincinnati, changed that. But is this team now an interesting team or what? I don't want to play Kansas State. If I'm Iowa State and I'm coming off that tough loss against Arizona and then know I have to face a red-hot Wildcats at home, I don't know if I want to face them. How about Kansas? After with the exception of the first 4 minutes of the game, just holding on to a win over Kansas State in Lawrence. What happens when they come to Manhattan in a few weeks? This is going to be really exciting. Let's get into this. First, they started off another red hot start. Ever since that Kansas game, they have figured out the first 4 minutes, first 4, 5, 6 minutes of basketball play, and it has been super exciting. They were dreadful in that Kansas game a few Saturdays ago. They were down 14-0 in the first 4 minutes of the game. In this one, just like the West Virginia game, they started on a 10-0 run. They were outstanding. Before the first TV timeout, they were on a 15-4 run. It was just absolutely electric. From what I saw, if you're listening right now, if you're heading home, if you're listening and you were at the game, let me know. But from what I saw, the crowd looked a little light in Manhattan, but it seemed to have a lot of high energy though. So although it was a little bit light, the student section looked pretty good. They also got some breadsticks, so nice to hear about that one. But other than that, it was looked a little small, but the energy was really high. I want to get into some comments here. I already see some coming in, so let's get to that real quick. And I love it. Terry Cavers right off the spot saying the next 3 games will be huge momentum builders. Absolutely agree. I'm going to get to that in a little bit second, Terry. And then I see one from George saying, why do you think Buddy Rich isn't playing? I personally think the reason that Buddy Rich isn't playing is something internal. I think it has to be something that's off the court, a personal reason, whatever the case may be, because there's got to be a reason why Jerome Tang isn't even responding to that in press conferences. It's something that has probably not to do with basketball, maybe not basketball related. I don't know if it's academic, not really sure, or personal conduct, not sure. But I think the reason that it's not being aired is because you don't need to air all your dirty laundry out if it's something that's not pertaining maybe as the basketball team as a whole. They're trying to build this culture and this buy-in, and they're trying to, and it looks like they're doing a good job at it. I think the fact that Buddy Rich isn't playing right now and the fact that we're not hearing any noise about that is probably because they're not trying to put out any negative energy as they're trying to rebuild this culture of this team. It's probably going to be without Buddy Rich in the future, I'm guessing. I assume he will probably transfer. That's just my thoughts. We'll see what happens in the future. But if we haven't seen him play, it's been 6 games since we've seen him play. We'll probably not see him play for quite some time, maybe even the rest of the season. I want to get back into this game, though. Thank you for the comments, though. Thank you so much for those. There were a couple little struggles in this game, but not much. I was trying my hardest. I was writing down some notes during the game, as I always do when I'm watching, and just trying to get some talking points to discuss with you. And really the only kind of struggle I saw was just under 10 minutes to go in the first half. And it was when we were seeing a little bit of David Castillo and Dug McDaniel on the court at the same time. There was a couple turnovers right there. And really, this is me nitpicking, because at the end of the day, I think going into halftime, there was 16 turnovers for Oklahoma State that Kansas State did. So, I mean, there was no worries whatsoever. This team was fantastic overall. And I think I even wrote that down. Yeah, 16 turnovers by Oklahoma State, and 22 of the points for Kansas State in the first half came off turnovers. But that was probably the worst thing I saw from Kansas State. Was they struggled in a little bit in the middle of the half, like right under the 10-minute mark left in the first half. And it was just a little bit of bad play. But other than that, there was really good basketball from this Kansas State team from the get-go. And I really hope we see ESPN top 10 for Kansas State, because if you didn't see it, you got to go check the highlights out. I wish I could show you on this film, on this one, but of course, for copyright purposes, I cannot. But you need to check out Coleman Hawkins' wild 3-point shot in the first half. It was electric. I mean, with time expiring on the shot clock, he turned around, he lined up the shot and just drained it for a beautiful 3-point shot. Everything was working for the Kansas State Wildcats tonight. Everything. And the reason shouldn't surprise us whatsoever. And I want to get into that as we continue this episode, this live reaction post-game show. Bring your comments, bring your questions in, folks, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Well, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easier to get in on the action. Gatorade? Can you do the Gatorade color? That's a Super Bowl thing, right? Red and green. What color does that make? That's a good Gatorade question. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place just a $5 bet, folks, you can win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. How fun is that? So download the app, head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just $5 can get you $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State. Thank you so much for making me your first listen, or possibly your second listen today, since we're coming at you this evening for a live post-game episode of Kansas State beating the brakes off the Oklahoma State Cowboys. It's just a such good feeling knowing that I'm going to do these post games, and I think about them all day. Knowing that I'm going to have this conversation with you all, and I'm preparing for it, and I'm getting ready. And before the even opening tip off, just knowing, I think in two ways. Like, how am I going to be able to have this conversation if this game doesn't turn off the way I want it to? Especially this game against Oklahoma State after having the momentum against West Virginia. And I just want to be able to have a positive conversation looking forward to seeing how this program can take that next step. Thankfully, I didn't have to have too many sidetracks or too many different, don't worries, because they were absolutely electric. We have talked about on this show multiple times over the past few weeks how they need to play 40 straight minutes of great play. And they did that yet again. They even got some of their bench players in towards the end of the game, some of that you don't even see all season long. It's really exciting to be able to get that type of win in your conference, in the toughest conference in basketball. I don't care if the SEC has so many players or so many teams in the top 25 right now. That's not changing the fact that the Big 12 is still the best conference in college basketball, even on a down year. And let me even throw some evidence to back that up. Regardless of how many teams in the SEC has ranked in the top 25, the Big 12 is the only team to have 5 ranked in the top 15 in net rankings. Okay, so the Big 12 is still the best conference in college basketball. Don't at me if you have a problem with that, which I doubt you folks will if you're listening from Locked On Kansas State. But if you do, debate a door. Please do. Getting back to it, there is no surprise that Kansas State is playing their best basketball. And the reason I say that is because there's no surprise if they're playing their best basketball when we're seeing Dug McDaniel playing his best basketball he has all season and since being a member of the Kansas State Wildcats. It's going hand in hand. It's not a coincidence, folks. It's exactly what we needed and exactly what we are now expecting to see, quite frankly, for the rest of the season. We need to see it. If we think there's any type of chance for a postseason bid, which, although the chances are still slim, don't get me wrong, these 2 wins don't change it much, but the motivation, the momentum turning, the momentum gaining from this team, it makes you think that you have a possibility to make something special out of this season when it's all said and done. Dug McDaniel played absolutely electric. Coleman Hawkins played absolutely electric. If those 2 players, which need to be the best 2 players on your roster, and quite frankly, I think that's where we were expecting it from the very get-go, for those 2 to be the top 2 players all season long. And if they're the best 2 for you all year, you're going to be just fine. And if we get the same type of play, plus the addition of David Gasson stepping up, because he didn't have his best game. Now, he didn't really need to. He didn't shoot much. He got into a little bit of foul issues. That's not really unexpected, but Gasson only went 5 points. He only shot 4 times. He only had 3 rebounds. Once the minutes all come back, I'm going to guess his minutes are going to be pretty low. I didn't really see him on the court as much as we usually do. But then again, it wasn't really needed. But when Coleman Hawkins goes 15 points after shooting 6 for 10 from the field, when he has 6 assists, 9 rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks, and one of those blocks was an absolute beauty in the second half. I mean, I think he swatted that thing all the way back to half court. It was insane. And then, of course, Dug McDaniel, 10 points, 6 assists, the big point right there. The 6 assists is more important than 10 points. And the 3 steals and only 1 turnover. The points are great from Dug McDaniel because obviously you need him to score a little bit and you want him to drive the lane, especially when there's an opening. But the facilitation from Dug McDaniel is the most important piece that we're seeing progress from. Because at the beginning of the season, you would see him play and you'd get some shooting from him. You'd get a little bit here and there, but you wouldn't see a lot of assist on the box score. And you needed that point guard. You needed that feel of a true point guard on the court. And at the beginning of the year, you knew it was a dreadful feeling, but you knew that was the main thing that this team was missing. And there was questions about what was going on behind the scenes, off the court maybe, or in practice between Coach Jerome Tang and Dug McDaniel. And you could tell in some of the pressers that Jerome Tang and Dug didn't have the best relationship, or dare I say, just a different type of relationship that we expect from a player and a coach, just based on some of the comments that we heard from Coach Tang and some of the pressers early in the season. Maybe it was a tough love. I'm not really sure now that we're getting to this point in the season. Regardless of that, we are now at the point where Dug McDaniel is becoming that true point guard we all knew he needed to be and all knew that he could be. With those 3 points, those 3-pointers are finally falling in. He was 2 for 5 from the 3-point line tonight. And that's something that he needs to step up for as well. If he's going to get the points, I'd love to see him from behind the 3-point line. At Michigan, he was close to a 40% 3-point shooter. I think he's only about 23, 24% so far this year. Now that has improved as of late. So, if you take the entire sample size of the season, you're also including that terrible beginning of the year. If you just look at the numbers from the last couple of games, I don't have them in front of me, but I guarantee to you that they're a lot better than 22 or 23%. You know who's another really interesting piece for this team that has stepped up? And we're going to get to Brennan Hausen in a minute because he's been absolutely incredible, and I'll get to him next. But Max Jones, I don't think Max Jones gets enough credit for what he does for this team. Would it be fair to say that Max Jones is the glue guy for Kansas State? The way he puts it all together. He's never the player that we talk about initially. He's never the player that we say is the star of the team. But every time we go back to the box score and we look at how these players are performing, Max Jones somehow, some way, even when the team was struggling, is putting up decent numbers almost every single game. I think he's an absolute glue guy, and I love when Max Jones performs well. And lately, that has been every single game. He's becoming one of my favorite players on the basketball team. And of course, it's not one of those conversations when we talk about the starting five. Max Jones is probably the last player that I'm going to talk about, and that's not a bad thing for him. It's just that everybody else has either some sort of storyline, some sort of narrative, or is just performing the way they should. With Max Jones, I think he's doing everything he should. Now, he did have 4 turnovers in this game. That was probably the only downside. I think he led the team in turnovers, but he finished with 14 points, which was 3rd on the team behind both Hausen and Coleman Hawkins, 5 for 8 from the field and 3 for 4 from behind the 3-point line. When you're shooting 75% from behind the arc, the only player doing better than that is Brennan Hausen. I mean, that's an incredible feeling to have, knowing that you have multiple players that can do that for you on any given night. When you're heading into this second half of the Big 12 conference schedule that we're going into right now, February is going to be a really tough month for Kansas State. It's not going to get any easier. Okay? It's not going anywhere. And it's going to start this Saturday, February 1st, right off the bat. Kansas State, Iowa State. Can Kansas State make a big difference right off the bat? Can they have a huge momentum swing? Has momentum already moved in the right direction for these Wildcats? I personally think so. I hope they can prove it on Saturday. But having players like Hawkins, McDaniel, and then, of course, Max Jones, if they can step up and do what they've done over these last couple games, that's exactly what you need. Speaking of players that have stepped up over the past, really this entire season, Brennan Hausen has been incredible. He leads the entire Big 12 out of all shooters with averaging 3 made 3-pointers per game. Now, with tonight's game, shooting 5 for 5 from the 3-point line, that number is going to go up. It's going to be obviously over the 3-point margin, and he's going to continue to lead the conference. He goes with 18 points, leads the entire team, and the only missed shot he had of the day was an off-dribble shot from inside the 3-point line. So what you're telling me is continue to pass it to him off the dribble, so he can just take shots outside the three-point line because, according to tonight, he doesn't miss when it's beyond 30 feet. Brennan Hausen has been incredible over these last couple games, and he continues to do that in this one. 3 for 4 also from the charity strike. 85-57. Just what an incredible game. I got a couple more things I want to talk about because there was definitely some fun things that I heard on the broadcast, and just overall some really interesting things to get to. I got a comment coming in as well. Looks like George gives me something. This season's not over. We finished with 17 wins, and then we got to win 3 conference championship games. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That is a really tough thing to do. I mean, it's not over. It's not impossible, but just don't hold your breath. I think that's a fair thing to say. Just don't hold your breath, okay? Because it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to get there. But if they play like this, if they play like they've played the last 2 games, then it's not out of the question. 100%. We'll be right back here after this break on Locked On Kansas State. All right, let's finish up this show here on Locked On Kansas State. We got plenty to get to still. One of the biggest things that I wrote down here, and it's heading right into halftime. I thought this was really funny. And let me know if you're watching the broadcast and you got this. And if you weren't listening to the broadcast, let me kind of explain to you what happened. As we're heading into halftime, the broadcast crew said, this 20-point lead, because Kansas State was up about 19, 20 points at the time. And they said was, quote, stunning that Kansas State was leading by 20 points. And they referenced the fact that both the teams at the time were 2-6 in the conference and heading in, and they just didn't expect Oklahoma State to be down by so many points heading in the half. And they also mentioned the fact that Oklahoma State beat Kansas State at home, yada, yada, all that good stuff. I am going to turn the questions right back to them. I'm going to be the interviewer in this question to the broadcast crew. Have you been watching the Wildcats lately? Because obviously you haven't. Maybe you're just watching highlights and just kind of getting the idea of who you need to pay attention to by talking on the play-by-play. But if you have been watching these Wildcats over the last couple games and getting to the press conferences with Jerome Tang over the past couple weeks and talking about how they're building this team and how they're so close from getting it right. And then they head into the West Virginia game and do it right. And then now tonight, they get into this game against Oklahoma State. And not only do they prove that West Virginia wasn't a hoax, they build upon it and do it even more and win by almost 30. They win by 28 points, and momentum couldn't be any higher heading into arguably the toughest road game of the season coming up on Saturday. Is the game in Ames, is that going to be tougher than the game in Lawrence? I think so. I think Kansas is the home field, and with the Jayhawks, I think it's lost a little bit this season after what they've gone through. Iowa State's a pretty magical team so far, and their only losses have been some tough losses, like really close 1-point losses. With the momentum that Kansas State has right now they're terrible on the road. We've seen that all year long. But are you counting out Kansas State even on the road right now after what you've seen the last couple games? I'm not. I'm not whatsoever. There was another weird thing too heading into halftime. Kansas State, Jerome Tang and Kansas State absolutely stunned the Cowboys in the first half. The head coach of Oklahoma State, once the buzzer rang, and this really at halftime, and this all stemmed from David Gasson with a last-second tip-in at halftime, just kind of showing that everything was going right for the Wildcats in this one. The head coach of Oklahoma State was just sitting on the bench, just standing there, like leaning against the scores table, getting ready as everybody's getting ready to go into the locker room. Like, he didn't move for a little bit and then slowly walked into the locker room. You could tell he did not want to go back into that locker room and have a conversation with his team and make the needed adjustments, because I don't know if he knew what the adjustments were needed to happen, because everything was working for Kansas State, and Oklahoma State just had, one, a terrible first half, and two, they didn't have any luck in their side because Kansas State was doing everything they needed to at the right times. Oklahoma State led up 16 turnovers in the first half. I mean, it's unreal. That's unreal how many they did. Got to shout out the coaching staff as well for the looks, right? The looks were really cool. The sweats or the suits and the sneakers, the coaches against Cancer Week that they're doing, the shoes are really clean, by the way. I'd love to get my hands on some of those shoes to rock them for sure. But that was really cool. I thought with the two tones for the jerseys against West Virginia, and then with the coaching staff in suits and sneakers. I mean, if you tie those two together, I mean, is that like the perfect combination of like maybe having like a crazy run? Maybe. Do you think? The two tones are a weird look, but they worked to break the losing streak last weekend. I thought that was really funny about the coaching staff. Last thing here that I want to get to, and if you have any questions other than that, I'd love to answer them as we wrap up this show. But I want to go back to the buy-in conversation. The buy-in is so strong on this team, and I think you have to put this conversation into play. If Coach Tang didn't bring up this entire season so far in the pressers, if he would have changed the way, and I've criticized him for this, and now I'm maybe starting to understand why he did it. Maybe I'm starting to get the bigger picture here. I'm not afraid to say when I'm wrong, and I might be wrong. And if I am truly wrong, then I'll tell you. But right now I'm questioning if I am. I criticize the fact of him not calling his players out or being more of a assertive coach in pressers over the last few weeks. And he would just give buzzwords I would use. And the buzzwords that he was discussing was, buy-in or culture or tinkering or things like that as of late. Now, there were some other buzzwords beforehand and all that good stuff, but those are the ones that we've heard lately. This buy-in has truly shifted around. Now, we saw this entire team get turned over upside down in the transfer portal this offseason. Heading into this year, there was so much momentum, so much good feelings, knowing that you had this type of pedigree of players coming in. Multiple players from the Big Ten, multiple players from the Big East. I mean, in basketball terms, that's a good feeling to have. And then they don't start off well. That's starting to change. And is it enough time to make something happen with a deep run? I'll say this to wrap up this show. It looks like we don't have any more questions. I appreciate it, by the way, for joining in this conversation of Locked On Kansas State. I'll end with this. If Kansas State defeats Iowa State on Saturday, the entire conversation of this season, where saying that the NCAA tournament is out of the question, will no longer be out of the question. I think there will be a very strong chance if you can defeat on the road a top 5 team in the country. Now, obviously, other things have to go right. Don't get me wrong. It's not the only win you can have all season long. But if they defeat Iowa State on Saturday, the chances of them going to the tournament are no longer zero. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And until then, this has been Locked On Kansas State.